The thing that's important to understand is that there are two components to doing the workstation migration, the directory synchronization and the actual device migration. So the directory synchronization function is where we connect or create objects from source into target. The configuration of it is fairly straightforward. In this case, I'm going from on-prem into Entra. So I've added my environments. I've got a local environment. I've got a cloud environment. What we do within this kind of depends. There's some architecture that has to be worked out. So if you're going on-prem and you're eventually going to be going on-prem in the target for your servers, sometimes it's better to do on-prem to on-prem sync and then let Azure AD Connect push those objects up into the target, or we can go from on-prem into Entra only. There's lots of configuration options there, but basically what you do is you simply come in, you add your environments. Then what we do is we define what we're going to do with the data. So when we sync the objects, what do we want to do with it? You pick your source, you pick your target. How do we want to create users? How do we want to create groups? Things like that. We can also get real granular with dealing with attributes. So we can move things around and move, data from one attribute to another attribute. This is going to be important when you're going from on-prem into Entra because the attributes are different. We can also manipulate the data as well. So if you wanted to change content as it comes from source to target, we have the capabilities of doing that. So if you wanted to change UPNs, you wanted to change data, different things like that, the tool can facilitate that. And again, this is a very comprehensive directory synchronization tool. So we can do on-prem to on-prem, on-prem to cloud, cloud to on-prem, whatever you need to. But again, the important thing to note is that there is a lot of flexibility. There is a lot of configuration capabilities within the tool to address those needs. Basically, once you add your environments, once you tell it how you want to deal with the data and what's coming over, you build this little workflow here. Now, in this case, I only have two steps, which is a read and a match. And this is because my target objects have already been created. So it's important to understand that in this particular case, my objects have already been created in a target. And all I'm really doing with this is just connecting the objects together. So this is really important because this is how we Reactle data when we start talking about endpoint migration, Reactling NAS and SAN devices, things like that, is that this is really where we're going to build that mapping between source user and target user. So one thing that I like to bring up is to make sure that everybody understands that when we are getting ready to do production migrations, we really want to have this component worked out, all configured for not just handfuls of users, but for all the users, especially groups as well. Because again, you could have a group called HR protecting data, and we want to make sure that group exists in the target or at least matched to another group in the target, so that as we bring data over, people won't lose access to that content. The directory synchronization component of the tool is really there to create objects, keep them up to date for the duration, create groups, keep them up to date, and then connect existing objects together for the Reactling of the data. So let's talk about devices and specifically moving workstations up into the cloud. The first thing to talk about is what are the requirements, right, to make this work? And the first thing is that we need to have an agent deployed on the workstations that are in scope for the migration. So that agent it's a silent install, doesn't really require much from a services resources perspective on the workstation. The agent runs as local system. You can push it out with a GPO, with the Intune policy, SCCM, login script, any way you want to. But that what happens is that when you push that agent out, it's going to call into the Azure instance that you've chosen. So we have instances all over the world, but the idea is that instance will call in on a regular basis to pick up jobs. It's calling out over port 443 into Azure. We don't need to constant VPN connections or regular VPN connections like sort of the old school tools do for picking up jobs and things like that, because this is a SaaS solution. So it calls in on a regular basis, picks up jobs, performs the actions. So one of the things that's also nice is that we collect data associated with the machines as well. So one of the things that I like is the fact that we collect profile information and last use time information. So the idea here is we can start making intelligent decisions about which devices we want to migrate. Because honestly, let's be real, right? Nobody's going to call you up and say, hey, I need to migrate Win 11 Workstation 1. They're going to call you up and say, hey, I need you to migrate at Dell. And so this gives you that information to be able to make intelligent decisions about who and what machines to migrate when you're given a list of people to migrate. Because you can see Angie here hasn't used this in a month. So maybe don't need to migrate Angie, but Adele, right? Adele used this 2 weeks ago. When we're looking at this type of information, it's just helpful. So again, you push the agent out, it calls into Azure over 443 and does this on a regular basis and picks up jobs. For the first thing that you're typically going to do is you're typically going to do a Reactle. Okay, so you come in and we'll pick these two machines here. You click apply action and you've now queued these two jobs. Okay, so you can see they've been queued. If we hit refresh here and we scroll over to the right a little bit, you can see that these two machines now have a current Reactle job status of queued. So what happens now is that when the agent calls in, it's going to say, hey, do you need me to do anything? And we're going to say, yes, we need you to do a Reactle. So what is a Reactle? A Reactle is where we are taking the data from the directory synchronization function, pushing a mapping file to that workstation, and we're saying, look at every file, folder, registry key, all the data except for the profiles, which we'll talk about in a minute. And wherever you find a source SID that has a matching SID from that mapping file, just insert that target SID with the same set of permissions. So all done behind the scenes. It's very seamless from an end user perspective. They don't really see anything that's going on. All we're doing is inserting a target SID with the same set of permissions. It's not destructive. We're not removing the source SID. We're just inserting that target SID. Users really, they don't see it. All we are doing at that point is just inserting those SIDs in the data, the folders, the files, and the registry keys. We don't do Windows profiles because Windows 10, 11, 12 profiles, they only allow one SID to be attached to that. So we don't do the profile reackling until you actually do the cutover of the devices. So just keep that in mind that when we do the final cutover, that's when we do the actual profile reackling. So while we're waiting for that, let's talk about the configuration of the tool and what we're doing, because it's going to be important. So we have lots of capabilities within the tool to customize the cutover if you need to. So here we can see, we can delay the join, we can delay the reboot. If they are hybrid machines in the source, we can remove the devices from the source. We can unregister them in Intune and, do all that stuff and then join it to the target. Intune, again, if the target's hybrid, in this case, not really important because we're moving these devices directly to Entra, but you might want to remove them from the source. You can do things like empty recycle bins and, you can merge it into an existing computer account if you wanted to. You can do things with network configurations, right? You're most likely not going to do anything with this. But again, the whole purpose here is to give you options if you want to. The Reactle, so this is an important part. So this is where we get to choose what is and isn't Reactled. So you can, again, pick and choose what you want. If you're using roaming profiles, we can Reactle roaming profiles and Reactle the WinNT.dat files and things like that. Service accounts we don't want to do ahead of time because that would be bad because you can only have one SID tied to a service account. You can blacklist things from being Reactled. So this is really important. Like, for example, Defender has registry keys that are always locked. You can't Reactle them. And so we put those in here by default. But the point of it is that you have the flexibility. So if you're running some antivirus software other than, Defender, you have other applications on there that have data that's locked that isn't Reactled, you can put that in there. We deal with reparse points on the device. So this is important because what this is going to do for you, especially for OneDrive, if you're using OneDrive, OneDrive has a local cache of data on the workstation that's Reactled a little bit differently, that has different ACLs tied to it. And so what this is going to do is process that OneDrive data store so that when you do your migration, the users don't have to re-download their local OneDrive data cache. And then how you deal with permissions and permission failures. There are a few other things that we need to configure. The first is when we're doing this migration. So if we go back here to profiles and we go to Entra join, because we're moving the devices into Entra, what we're doing is we're using a bulk enrollment package to be able to join the device after we do the Reactling and remove it from the source. So you need to tell us what the name of the package is that you're going to be using. And you just generate this through the Windows Configuration Designer. It's just you download it off of the Microsoft Store. It's a Microsoft app. You create the package, how you want to deal with naming. So do you want to use the name that's defined in the package, or do you want to keep the original device name? Totally up to you. You can enroll it in Intune in the target. You can do the Intune cleanup and the autopilot cleanup, completely optional, right? If the devices were autopiloted in the source, we want to obviously clean that out. It'll clear out the hardware keys in the source tenant and get rid of the reg keys associated with autopilot and the source Intune if they're hybrid and things like that. Nice to have stuff. Definitely saves a ton of time. We just do it all in one click of a button, right? We do this all automatically as part of the transition. We can, if you want, remove the computer object from the source AD forest. I generally don't recommend this because what has to happen is that when you do this, the device itself needs to be connected to that on-prem AD environment, right? They have to have a VPN connection so that we can reach into the source AD, use these credentials and remove that account. So I don't like doing this simply because it requires the user to be connected to VPN, and I generally don't want that to happen. So I would usually suggest, for the most part, unless you have a persistent VPN client, just remove the computer object by hand. But again, it's there. If you want it, great. If not, in the bulk enrollment package, you can also create a sort of a local account. We can also create one within the tool itself as well. So again, more options for you to be able to do that. And then lastly, right, from a configuration perspective, the thing that we need to do is that we need to tell the tool where this bulk enrollment package is. In this case, I'm putting this on the local C drive, and I've created a folder called Entra, and I'm just putting that bulk enrollment package there. Now, this could be a UNC path. I don't like that because it requires the user to be connected to the local ADs and have access to file shares on that local AD, which requires a VPN connection. So I like just creating a GPO or Intune policy to push it out ahead of time. So that way it's taken care of. So that's really it from a configuration perspective. One of the things that we have within the tool is a lot of extensibility. So you can see here, if we look at this workstation, there's a little box that pops up that says, hey, we're getting ready to migrate you, save your work and click OK. I created that. I made that. And you can see that through the actions and tasks here. The action is simply the drop-down menu item, okay? Meaning that I selected the workstations, chose this save your work options, and what happened was then it went through, ran this task. So if we look at this, this is a PowerShell script that basically just pops up a box that says, hey, save your work, click next, and then it will go to the next task. So the whole point here is that you can do anything on these workstations that you can do through command line function or PowerShell script pre, post, or during migration. So if you need to remove packages, add packages, change keys, remove stuff, whatever you want, you can do through this tool. Everything that we do is accessible to you. We don't black box anything. So this is important to note that you have a lot of flexibility here to do different things. So like, for example, here's the Entra ID with a pop-up. So basically what I did is I added that save your work pop-up to the Entra ID cutover. So that's these 4 steps. And I just added this to the top of it so that this way the user gets more messages, they get more pop-ups so that they can do, be notified about what's happening to their device. So again, lots of cool things you can do here, lots of communication capabilities, lots of different things that we can do to help alert the user what's going on with their workstation. So now coming to these workstations. So we're going to pick this Win11 Workstation 2 machine. We're going to do the Entra ID cutover. We're just going to do the basic one. We're going to click Apply Action. You're going to choose your profile. So what this is basically saying is what bulk enrollment package do you want to use? You click Apply, and that's really all you have to do. So now if we look over here to the right, you can see that the Entra ID cutover status is set to queued. And then basically what we're doing at this point is waiting for the device to call in to pick up the job. From there, what it's going to do is it's going to go through those 4 steps that I showed you. The first is that it's going to download the mapping file. Then it's going to perform a full Reactle of the device. It's going to Reactle not only all the data, but the profiles itself, and then remove the device from the source, run the bulk enrollment package, which will join it to the target tenant. Now, for sake of expediency, I disabled Windows Hello and all that stuff. But the idea here is simply that from an end user perspective, what they'll see is boxes that'll pop up, one that says, hey, we're going to restart your box in 60 seconds. Right, again, we can change all that. The device reboots, they log in with their Entra ID. They'll go through Windows Hello if you're using Windows Hello. That's it. At that point, they will see their same workstations, the picture of Fluffy the cat in the background. Everything will stay the same. The only difference is that they will be now a member of the target tenant only. And you can see it's moved to in progress now. So it's doing that Reactle. And a couple things I want to bring up that are really important. Quest as a company has been around for over 30 years, right? We are the industry leaders in this particular space. We've been doing this for a long time. We have staff all over the world. Our support organization is great. We offer 24/7 support for our solutions, who you can call. You're not just buying a tool, you're buying people. We can change things like last logged in user. We can change a lot of different things in the tool. Part of this is absolutely going to be communications. You're absolutely going to need to tell people what's going on so that they know, because the communication part is what will make or break your project. The technical stuff, we got that. This is all pretty easy. It's the communication and making sure that, you know, your end users know what's happening. That's going to be the most important part of this project. All right, so I'm logging in with her Entra account. That the Entra cutover status within the tool is marked as completed. You can see the, you know, the background's the same, the icons are the same, everything looks the same. When I run dsreg cmd/status, right, you can see that the device is now Entra only joined, not joined to a domain, so it's only in the cloud. In my bulk provisioning package, right, I haven't reset the name, so it changes the name. The user just logs in, and they're done. Everything looks the same. Everything's pretty straightforward. So again, you know, trying to make this as easy as possible for your end users. We can run the Intune registration stuff in the target, you know, so you can start applying Intune policies to the devices and kind of doing whatever you need.